One freezing winter morning, Caleb Brooks expected nothing more than another emergency repair call. Instead, beneath a snow-covered loading dock, he found the very CEO who had once signed the paperwork that nearly destroyed his career. She was alone, terrified, and carrying a secret powerful enough to ruin lives. Helping her could cost Caleb everything: his job, his daughter, even his future. But as hidden lies began to surface, one ordinary father discovered that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't saving someone's life. It's refusing to let the truth freeze to death. The wind rolled through the empty loading bays like something alive, carrying loose snow across the cracked asphalt behind Northline Foods' largest distribution warehouse. It was 3:47 on a bitter January morning, the kind of Cleveland cold that settled into steel, concrete, and bone without asking permission. Caleb Brooks eased his maintenance truck beside the service entrance and shut off the engine. The sudden silence lasted only a second before another sound reached him: the distant groan of metal contracting under freezing temperatures. His phone still displayed the emergency work order: heating failure, distribution center 14, immediate response required. He sighed, rubbing tired eyes before pulling his knit cap lower over his ears. Another overnight call. Another problem nobody noticed until everything stopped working. Inside the warehouse, employees huddled near portable space heaters, while forklifts sat motionless in long rows. A supervisor hurried toward Caleb. "Thank God you're here. Half the loading wing lost heat 20 minutes ago." Caleb nodded without wasting words. "Anybody smell gas?" "No." "Any alarms?" The supervisor shook his head. Caleb grabbed his toolbox and thermal scanner. "Keep everyone away from the west loading dock until I know what's happening." The man hesitated. "Is it really that serious?" Caleb looked toward the dark hallway leading deeper into the building. "I don't know yet." That answer always made people uncomfortable. Years ago, he'd learned something from his father, a firefighter who never came home after responding to an apartment fire. Machines whispered before they screamed. People usually ignored the whisper. Caleb never did. He followed the insulated pipes running above the warehouse ceiling, listening more than looking. The building had its own rhythm: the hum of circulation pumps, the vibration of old blower motors, the soft ticking of expanding metal. Tonight, something was wrong. Not because something was missing, because something was too quiet. He stopped beneath the main control panel and frowned. The circulation pumps weren't fighting against frozen pipes. They weren't trying to start at all. Someone had told them not to. Caleb frowned, but kept walking. Before opening the mechanical room, he stepped outside toward the rear loading docks where the heating intake units exhausted warm air into the freezing darkness. Snow crunched beneath his boots. His flashlight swept across stacked pallets, dumpsters, and delivery trailers. Then the beam stopped. Someone was sitting beneath the loading canopy. No, not sitting. Curled into herself. Motionless. Caleb hurried forward. A woman wore an expensive charcoal coat that offered almost no protection against the brutal wind. Snow had settled across her shoulders. Her hands clutched a leather document case so tightly her knuckles had turned pale beneath the cold. "Ma'am?" No answer. He knelt beside her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. She looked exhausted rather than unconscious. Then recognition hit him. Elaine Whitmore, Northline Foods CEO. Or at least, she had been yesterday. Every television station in Ohio had carried the story about her suspension after an emergency board meeting. Caleb had stared at the headline for barely 5 seconds before turning the TV off. People like him didn't have time to follow executive scandals. He had a daughter waiting for breakfast in a few hours. Elaine tried to sit up, but her arms trembled violently. Caleb removed his insulated work jacket without thinking and wrapped it around her shoulders. You're freezing. She gave a weak shake of her head. I'm fine. No, Caleb answered quietly. You're not. He reached for his phone. I'm calling an ambulance. The movement changed everything. Elaine's eyes snapped fully open. With surprising strength, she grabbed his wrist. No. Her voice cracked from cold and exhaustion. Please. She looked over her shoulder toward the dark parking lot, as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. Don't let them know where I am. Caleb studied her face. This wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't pride. It was fear. Real fear. They're waiting, she whispered, fighting to catch her breath. They're waiting for me to make one last mistake. Before Caleb could ask who they were, a gust of wind carried ice crystals across the pavement. He looked back toward the warehouse. Something still bothered him. He glanced at the rooftop exhaust fans. Nothing. No vibration. No startup cycle. No emergency restart attempt. The system hadn't failed. Someone had disabled it. Caleb stood, helping Elaine to her feet with one hand, while staring at the mechanical control screen visible through the loading dock window. A single administrator account remained logged into the heating controls. Someone with executive-level authorization had manually switched the entire heating system into maintenance mode. And that wasn't an accident. Caleb stared at the control screen through the warehouse window for another second before looking back at Elaine. The snow had begun to collect on the shoulders of his work jacket now wrapped around her. She wasn't shivering as violently anymore, but her breathing remained shallow. Can you walk? He asked. She nodded once. I'm not leaving until you tell me who you're hiding from. Elaine lowered her eyes. I'm not hiding from one person. She swallowed hard. I'm hiding from everyone who thinks they've already won. The answer raised more questions than it solved. Caleb slipped his phone back into his pocket instead of dialing 911. Every instinct told him she needed medical attention, but another part of him recognized something else. Panic. Not the panic of someone afraid of the cold. The panic of someone terrified of being found. Come on, he said quietly. Let's get inside. They entered through the maintenance entrance, away from the main warehouse floor. The mechanical room was small, filled with humming electrical cabinets and insulated pipes that radiated comforting warmth. Caleb pulled over a folding chair. Sit. Elaine obeyed without arguing. He switched on a portable heater and placed it several feet away so the warmth reached her gradually. You warm someone up too fast after this kind of exposure. It can make things worse. She looked at him with surprise. You know that? My father was a firefighter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the steady hum of transformers filled the room. Caleb opened a storage cabinet and found 2 bottles of water. He handed one to Elaine. Her fingers trembled so badly she struggled to twist the cap. Without saying a word, Caleb loosened it before handing it back. She managed a tired smile. Thank you. It sounded strange hearing gratitude from someone whose signature still sat inside the disciplinary file that nearly cost him his job 6 months earlier. Neither of them mentioned it. Not yet. Instead, Caleb picked up the maintenance tablet connected to the building controls. The administrator account remained active. No hacker. No software malfunction. Someone had entered the proper credentials. Someone inside Northline. Elaine noticed what he was looking at. Don't. He glanced toward her. Don't say that name out loud, she whispered. There are cameras. Caleb slowly lifted his eyes toward the security dome mounted above the doorway. She wasn't wrong. The room was being recorded. He quietly closed the maintenance application without opening the user log. Then he reached into his toolbox, removed a black marker, and wrote a simple note across his inspection pad instead of speaking. We'll talk somewhere else. Elaine read it. Her expression softened for the first time. You think before you speak? I fix machines. He shrugged. They're easier than people. A faint laugh escaped her despite everything. It disappeared almost immediately. She tightened her grip around the leather document case resting on her lap. Caleb noticed the white marks across her knuckles. You haven't let go of that since I found you. I can't. Why? She hesitated. If I lose this. Her voice nearly vanished. Everything they said about me becomes the truth. Before Caleb could ask another question, his radio crackled. Maintenance, respond. The warehouse supervisor's voice echoed through the speaker. Customers are calling about delayed shipments. How much longer until the heat's back? Caleb glanced once more at the administrator account still displayed on the screen. He already knew the answer. This isn't mechanical, he replied carefully. I'm still diagnosing it. He switched off the radio. Elaine looked up. You know someone did this. I know the system didn't fail. And you're still helping me? Caleb leaned against the workbench, folding his arms. I haven't decided who I'm helping. She frowned. What does that mean? It means there's a warehouse full of workers out there standing in the cold. He pointed toward the control cabinet. If someone shut this system down on purpose, they're risking every one of those people. He looked directly into her eyes. I don't care whose office they work in. For several long seconds, Elaine said nothing. Then she whispered something so quietly, Caleb almost missed it. I was wrong about you. The words hung between them, not as an apology. Not yet, as a realization. Outside, headlights swept across the frosted windows. A black SUV rolled slowly past the loading docks before stopping near the employee entrance. Elaine's face drained of color. They found me. Caleb turned toward the window. The engine stayed running. No one got out. Not yet. The SUV idled beneath the warehouse lights, its headlights cutting pale ribbons through the falling snow. Caleb counted to 5, then to 10. Whoever was inside wasn't in a hurry. They were waiting. Elaine stood so quickly that the folding chair scraped across the concrete floor. They're checking. Checking what? Whether someone saw me come in. Her voice had lost every trace of the composed executive people saw on television. It was the voice of someone who hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and no longer trusted her own shadow. Caleb walked to the narrow window beside the mechanical room door, careful not to expose himself. The SUV's windows were too dark to see through. His radio buzzed again. Caleb, where are you? The warehouse supervisor asked. Corporate security just called. They want confirmation that nobody unauthorized entered the property tonight. Corporate security. Caleb frowned. That was unusually fast. We're still dealing with the heating issue, he answered evenly. I'll call you back. He clicked the radio off. Elaine looked at him. They're moving quicker than I expected. You expected this? I expected them to notice I disappeared. She lowered her eyes toward the leather case resting on her lap. I didn't expect them to know where to look. Caleb followed her gaze. What's inside? She hesitated. Proof. Proof of what? Not yet. The answer frustrated him, but her expression told him she wasn't refusing out of arrogance. She was measuring every word as if one mistake could destroy whatever chance she had left. Caleb picked up his inspection clipboard. If I'm going to help you, I need more than half the story. I know. But first we need to leave. She blinked. Leave? This room has cameras. He pointed toward the ceiling. And whoever shut down this heating system may already know I'm standing here. For the first time, Elaine seemed to notice the blinking red light on the security camera. A quiet realization crossed her face. They'll review the footage. They review everything. Caleb reached into a locker and pulled out an old gray maintenance hoodie. Wear this. She stared at it. I can't. You'll stand out in that coat. After a moment, she slipped the oversized hoodie over her expensive clothes. It smelled faintly of machine oil and laundry detergent. Her tailored image disappeared almost instantly. Now she looked like any exhausted warehouse employee finishing an overnight shift. Caleb grabbed his toolbox. We're leaving through the rear service corridor. What about your job? He smiled without humor. My job is fixing problems. He looked toward the silent heating controls. Not tonight. I've got more than one. They slipped through a narrow hallway that connected the mechanical room to an older maintenance exit rarely used by warehouse staff. As they walked, Caleb couldn't ignore the silence around them. Normally the building breathed. Fans spun, compressors cycled, boilers rumbled. Tonight everything felt unnaturally still. The silence bothered him more than the cold. At the rear exit, Caleb stopped. Before opening the door, he quietly checked the digital access log mounted beside it. Every maintenance door recorded entries. One badge had opened the control room 38 minutes before the heating shut down. Administrator access, no employee number, just a master authorization. Caleb's jaw tightened. Someone had intentionally hidden their identity. Outside, the SUV was no longer parked near the employee entrance. It had disappeared. Elaine released a shaky breath. They left. For now. Snow continued falling, covering the fresh tire tracks almost as quickly as they had been made. Caleb unlocked his pickup truck. The passenger door creaked open. Elaine froze beside it. I shouldn't involve you any further. He looked across the empty parking lot. I think that decision was made the moment I found you. She climbed inside without another word. As Caleb started the engine, his phone vibrated against the dashboard. The caller ID displayed a name he hadn't expected before sunrise. Family Court Services. His appointment regarding Jada's custody review had been moved up from next week to tomorrow morning. Caleb stared at the screen as the call continued ringing. The timing felt impossible, almost convenient. He declined the call and pulled onto the snow-covered road. Beside him, Elaine watched the warehouse disappear in the rearview mirror. Neither of them noticed that another pair of headlights had quietly fallen in behind Caleb's truck, keeping a careful distance as they disappeared into the sleeping city. The streets of Cleveland were nearly empty before dawn. Snow drifted across intersections, softening the glow of traffic lights and covering tire tracks almost as quickly as they appeared. Caleb drove with both hands steady on the wheel, saying nothing. Silence had its own purpose. It gave frightened people room to decide whether they were ready to tell the truth. Elaine stared through the passenger window, still clutching the leather document case against her chest. Every few seconds, she glanced into the side mirror, almost as if she expected someone to appear. You can relax for a minute, Caleb said quietly. I'll relax when this is over. You know when that'll be? She managed a tired smile. I used to think I did. A few blocks later, Caleb turned into a quiet neighborhood of modest brick duplexes. The porch lights were still on in several homes where shift workers were just getting ready for bed. His small rental house sat near the end of the street, its front steps dusted with fresh snow. Before shutting off the engine, he looked at Elaine. There are a few rules. She nodded. I'm listening. My daughter comes first. Without hesitation, Elaine answered, She should. You don't tell her anything she doesn't need to know. I won't. And whatever's in that case stays sealed until you're ready to explain why people are chasing it. Elaine rested one hand on the worn leather bag. I can agree to that. Caleb studied her face for another moment. She looked exhausted enough to fall asleep sitting upright. Good. He stepped out into the cold, and quietly unlocked the front door. Warm air greeted them, carrying the familiar scent of coffee grounds and cinnamon oatmeal left in the slow cooker overnight. The house wasn't large. A small living room opened into a compact kitchen, and children's drawings covered one wall beside family photos. Elaine paused. Everything inside felt lived in. A backpack rested neatly beside the front door. A pair of tiny winter boots sat on a drying mat. An inhaler lay beside a bowl of oranges on the kitchen counter. Caleb noticed her looking. My daughter likes pretending fruit cancels out hot chocolate. The corner of Elaine's mouth lifted. I hope she's right. He motioned toward the couch. Sit down. Instead of asking questions, Caleb retrieved a clean blanket, a glass of warm water, and a portable heater from the hallway closet. He plugged it in several feet away from the couch. You'll warm up slowly. You've done this before. My dad taught me a few things. She wrapped the blanket around herself without speaking. Caleb then took out his phone, opened the camera, and placed it on the coffee table. Elaine looked puzzled. What are you doing? Protecting both of us. He pressed record. The time is 4:41 a.m. I'm Caleb Brooks, maintenance technician for Northline Foods. Ms. Elaine Whitmore arrived suffering from cold exposure after I found her outside Distribution Center 14. She remains in possession of one sealed document case. I have not opened it, searched it, or removed any contents. He looked toward Elaine. If anyone ever claims otherwise, there's the beginning of the truth. For the first time that night, Elaine's eyes filled with tears. No one has tried to protect me without asking for something in return. Caleb ended the recording. I'm not protecting you. She blinked. I'm protecting the facts. Before either of them could say another word, a soft cough echoed from the hallway. A bedroom door cracked open. 11-year-old Jada Brooks stood there in oversized pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes while holding the small red rescue whistle that always hung beside her bed. Dad? Caleb's expression softened immediately. What are you doing up, sweetheart? I heard the truck. Her sleepy eyes drifted past him. They settled on the unfamiliar woman wrapped in a gray maintenance hoodie beneath the blanket. Jada frowned, confused but calm. Then she quietly asked the question neither adult had been ready to answer. Is she the lady who got you in trouble at work? The room fell silent. Elaine lowered her eyes before Caleb could answer. He had never hidden the truth from Jada. Not all of it, anyway. When Northline suspended him months earlier after he shut down a neighborhood grocery store because he detected dangerous fumes in the ventilation system, he had simply told his daughter, sometimes doing the right thing costs you first. Jada had remembered. Caleb knelt until he was eye level with her. She signed the paperwork. Jada looked from her father to Elaine. Did you know my dad was trying to keep people safe? Elaine's fingers tightened around the warm mug Caleb had placed in front of her. No. Her answer came quietly. I thought I did. Jada waited. Elaine continued without looking away. I read a report that said your father ignored company procedures and caused thousands of dollars in losses. My dad doesn't lie. I know that now. Those 4 words carried more weight than any apology. Jada remained still for another moment before walking into the kitchen. She opened a cabinet, reached onto the second shelf, and returned with a small box. She set it on the coffee table. Inside were individually wrapped peppermint tea bags. My grandma used to drink this when she was cold, she said. Dad says warm drinks help. Elaine blinked in surprise. You want me to have one? Jada shrugged. You still look cold. Caleb watched the exchange without speaking. Kindness came naturally to his daughter. Trust did not. While the kettle heated on the stove, Jada quietly disappeared down the hallway. She returned carrying a small plastic device. Elaine recognized it immediately. A peak flow meter. My doctor says I should check my breathing every morning, Jada explained. If somebody's been outside in weather like this, they should probably make sure they're breathing okay. Elaine accepted the device with trembling hands. Thank you. Jada gave a tiny nod but didn't smile. She wasn't angry. She was careful. Caleb knew that look. It was the same expression she wore whenever someone promised something they might not keep. A few minutes later, the three of them sat around the small kitchen table. Outside, dawn was beginning to soften the darkness, painting the snowy street pale blue. Elaine wrapped both hands around the steaming mug. I haven't sat at a kitchen table in months. Caleb glanced up. What do you mean? I've been eating in conference rooms, airports, hotel suites. She looked around the modest home. I forgot what quiet sounded like. Her eyes drifted toward the family photographs lining the wall. One showed Caleb teaching Jada to ride a bicycle. Another captured them laughing beneath fireworks on the 4th of July. A third showed the two of them beside an old red pickup truck with an older man in a firefighter's uniform. My father, Caleb said, noticing where she was looking. He taught me to listen. Elaine frowned slightly. Listen? To pipes, boilers, air handlers. He smiled faintly. Everything talks before it breaks. Jada grinned. Dad says machines complain just like people. For the first time that morning, Elaine laughed softly. It lasted only a second. Then her gaze settled on the leather document case resting beside her chair. The laughter disappeared. Caleb noticed. You haven't let it out of your reach once. I can't. Does somebody want what's inside? They want it destroyed. The room grew quiet again. Caleb leaned back in his chair. You don't have to tell me everything yet. But if danger comes through that door, I need to know enough to protect my daughter. Elaine looked directly at him. I understand. She rested one hand on the sealed case. I promise this stays closed until I can explain everything. Before Caleb could respond, his phone vibrated across the kitchen table. A news alert filled the screen. Breaking. Suspended Northline CEO Elaine Whitmore reportedly missing. Company representatives decline comment. Almost at the same moment, another notification appeared. Northline Security requests all employees report any contact with Elaine Whitmore immediately. Caleb slowly locked his phone. Across the table, Elaine had already seen the headline reflected in his eyes. Without saying a word, she understood that by opening his front door, he had just stepped into a story far bigger than either of them had imagined. Caleb slipped his phone face down onto the table. I don't want Jada reading that. His daughter looked between them. I already know something's wrong. You know enough for tonight, Caleb said gently. Jada accepted the answer, though not happily. She had inherited her father's habit of noticing what people didn't say. I need to get ready for school in a couple of hours. Caleb smiled. Go try to get another hour of sleep. She started towards the hallway, then stopped beside Elaine. If you need another blanket, they're in the closet by the bathroom. Elaine looked up. Thank you. Jada gave a quiet nod and disappeared down the hall, the small red rescue whistle swinging gently from its cord before her bedroom door clicked shut. For a long moment, neither adult spoke. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. You promised you wouldn't bring danger to my front door. I know. And yet Northline is already asking employees to report you. Elaine wrapped both hands around the cooling mug. They're not looking for me because they're worried. Then why? She looked toward the living room window, where dawn had begun painting pale streaks across the snow. Yesterday afternoon, the board announced I had ignored repeated safety warnings. Were they true? No. You signed the reports. I signed summaries. She met his eyes. I never saw the original inspections. Caleb frowned. You approved decisions without seeing the raw reports? A shadow of regret crossed her face. I trusted the system. He leaned back slowly. That's not the same thing. No. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. It isn't. She placed the leather document case carefully on the table between them. The copies inside are the first original inspection files I've seen. You opened them? Only enough to realize something was terribly wrong. Caleb looked at the sealed clasps. Then why haven't you taken them to the police? I was on my way. What happened? I never made it. She drew a slow breath. When I reached the warehouse, every company credential I owned stopped working within minutes. My phone was remotely disabled. My company vehicle shut down after its access was revoked. Even the security gates rejected my badge. So you were stranded. I walked. In this weather? She nodded. I thought someone inside the warehouse would still believe me. Instead, she had nearly frozen beneath the loading canopy. Caleb rested his elbows on the table. Someone knew exactly where you'd end up. I've been asking myself the same question. His eyes drifted toward the document case. Whatever's in there must be worth an awful lot. It isn't worth money. It's worth control. Before Caleb could ask another question, his landline rang. The sound startled both of them. Very few people still called that number. He answered on the second ring. Caleb Brooks. Mr. Brooks, this is Denise Carter from Family Court Services. I apologize for the early hour, but your custody review has officially been moved to 9 o'clock this morning. Caleb closed his eyes for a second. I received the notification. We'll also need updated employment verification. I'll bring it. After ending the call, he remained still. Elaine understood immediately. They changed the hearing. By a week. Because of me? I don't know. But the timing gnawed at him. Everything seemed to be moving at once. The heating system, Elaine's disappearance, the sudden custody hearing. None of it felt random anymore. Outside, the first school bus rolled slowly through the neighborhood, leaving 2 clean tracks across the untouched snow. Caleb stood and looked through the front window. Across the street, a dark sedan sat parked beneath a bare maple tree. Its engine was running. The windshield was beginning to fog from the inside. It hadn't been there when he came home. Without turning around, Caleb spoke quietly. I think we have company. Elaine walked to the window beside him. One look at the sedan was enough. Her face lost what little color had returned. They followed us. This time, Caleb was certain of one thing. The cold outside had never been the greatest danger. He watched the dark sedan without moving the curtain. Don't stand in front of the window, he said quietly. Elaine stepped back at once. Do you recognize the car? She shook her head. No, but whoever's inside knows this house now. Caleb took another slow look. The car wasn't trying to hide. It wasn't flashing lights or sending anyone to the front door. It was simply waiting. His father used to say that fires weren't always loud. Sometimes the most dangerous ones smoldered in silence before anyone smelled smoke. This felt the same. Caleb picked up his phone and opened the neighborhood security camera app shared by several families on the block. The recording from 30 minutes earlier showed his pickup pulling into the driveway. 40 seconds later, the same sedan rolled slowly past the house. It disappeared. Then, 5 minutes later, it returned and parked across the street. They circled first, Caleb murmured. They wanted to make sure. Elaine closed her eyes. They're watching. No. Caleb zoomed in on the timestamp. They're waiting. There was a difference. Someone watching gathered information. Someone waiting expected something to happen. A soft beep came from the hallway. Jada's bedroom door opened again. She had changed into jeans and a thick sweater, her backpack already resting on one shoulder. "You guys are talking really quietly." Caleb forced a smile. "Bad habit." She noticed both adults looking toward the front window. "Is something outside?" "Just a car." Jada walked closer, but Caleb gently rested a hand on her shoulder before she reached the curtain. "Let's leave the blinds alone." She studied his face. That was all she needed to know. Something was wrong. She didn't ask another question. Instead, she reached for the kettle and poured herself a cup of oatmeal from the slow cooker. Routine. That was another lesson Caleb had tried to teach her. When life became frightening, do the next ordinary thing. Elaine watched the little girl quietly preparing breakfast before school. "You've raised her well." Caleb smiled faintly. "She helps raise me, too." The comment lingered in the room. After a few minutes, Caleb pulled a legal pad from the kitchen drawer. "If you're staying here for a few hours, we're doing this my way." Elaine looked up. He drew 3 lines down the page. On the second column, he wrote, "Things we assume." On the third, "Things we can prove." Elaine couldn't help smiling. "You organize problems like an engineer." "I'm a maintenance technician." He shrugged. "If you guess too early, people get hurt." He slid the pad toward her. "Start with facts." Elaine looked at the blank paper. "My phone was disabled." She wrote it down. "My company access was revoked." Another line. "I still have these documents." Another. Then she stopped. Caleb noticed. "What?" She hesitated. "I don't know who I can trust anymore." He nodded. "Then don't write names." She looked at him with quiet appreciation. The doorbell camera chimed. No knock followed, just the electronic notification. Caleb opened the live feed on his phone. The front porch was empty. A small insulated paper bag sat neatly beside the welcome mat. No delivery truck. No person walking away, just the bag. Jada frowned. "We didn't order breakfast." Caleb didn't open the door immediately. Instead, he switched to the camera's recorded playback. A person wearing a dark winter coat had placed the bag on the porch less than 20 seconds earlier. The hood covered the face completely. The individual had never looked toward the camera, almost as though they already knew exactly where it was. Caleb unlocked the door but kept the storm door closed. Using the end of a broom, he pulled the bag inside. There was no food, only a plain white envelope, no stamp, no address, just one word written across the front in black marker. Caleb. He slowly opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No signature, only one typed sentence. "If you want to keep your daughter, stop helping Elaine Whitmore." No signature, no fingerprints, no company logo. Just a clean sheet of paper folded with deliberate precision. Caleb read the sentence twice before quietly slipping it back into the envelope. "What is it?" Jada asked. He looked at his daughter. For one brief moment, he considered lying. Instead, he folded the paper once more and placed it inside his jacket pocket. "Something for grown-ups." Jada studied his face. "You always get that look when you're worried." He smiled gently. "And you always notice." She walked over and hugged him without another question. Caleb wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her a little longer than usual. Elaine looked away. She suddenly felt like an intruder inside a moment that belonged only to a father and his little girl. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Caleb released Jada and turned. "For what?" "For bringing this to your house. You didn't write the note." "But it came because of me." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed to the front window again. The dark sedan was gone. Only 2 fresh tire tracks remained across the snow. They left. Elaine didn't sound relieved. They wanted us to read it first. Caleb nodded. They succeeded. Jada glanced toward the clock hanging above the stove. Dad, the bus comes in 35 minutes. Reality returned all at once. School, the custody hearing, his suspended job, a frightened executive sleeping on his couch, and now an anonymous threat involving the person he loved most. He inhaled slowly. Normal morning, he said with a faint smile. Jada rolled her eyes. Not even close. That made both adults laugh softly. The laughter lasted only a second, but it broke the weight hanging over the room. Caleb poured Jada another spoonful of oatmeal. Eat while it's hot. She obeyed, though she kept glancing toward Elaine with quiet curiosity. Finally, she asked, "Are you going somewhere after you get warm?" Elaine looked at Caleb before answering. "I don't know yet." Jada accepted that answer more easily than most adults would have. "You can stay until Dad gets back." Caleb looked at her. "What makes you think I'm leaving?" "You have court?" He blinked. "I heard the phone." Children heard more than adults believed. He sighed. "I do." Jada stirred her oatmeal. "I'll be okay at school." "I know." She pointed toward Elaine. "I meant her." Elaine lowered her head, visibly moved. No board meeting, no shareholder, no executive had spoken to her with such simple kindness in a very long time. Caleb checked his watch. "I need to make a few calls before sunrise." He stepped into the laundry room and quietly shut the door behind him. His first call went to the warehouse supervisor. No answer. The second was to human resources. Straight to voicemail. His third call was to the independent number used by Northline's ethics hotline. The line rang once, then disconnected. He frowned. Either the system was down, or someone had shut off more than the warehouse heating. Returning to the kitchen, he found Elaine standing beside the family photo wall. She was looking closely at one picture in particular. Caleb and Jada stood beside an aging fire engine, smiling next to a tall man in turnout gear. "Your father?" Caleb nodded. He believed every alarm deserved to be checked. Elaine traced the edge of the frame with her eyes. And if the alarm turned out to be false? He'd still rather answer 100 false alarms than ignore one real one. She turned toward him. "That's why you stopped the grocery store. I heard something the report didn't. And everyone thought you overreacted. I've gotten used to that." Elaine looked down at the sealed document case resting by the couch. "So have I." At that exact moment, Caleb's work phone vibrated. A new message flashed across the screen. "Mandatory meeting. All maintenance personnel report to Distribution Center 14 at 8 Stikurimum. Failure to appear will be treated as voluntary resignation." Caleb read the message twice. The custody hearing began at 9. Someone had arranged the schedule perfectly. For the first time, he could clearly see the shape of the trap beginning to close. Caleb set the phone on the kitchen counter without saying a word. Elaine read the expression on his face before he spoke. "What happened?" "They've ordered every maintenance technician to report back to Distribution Center 14 at 8. She frowned. "And your custody hearing?" 9 o'clock. Silence settled over the room. Neither appointment could be moved. Missing the meeting could cost him his job. Missing family court could cost him far more. Jada quietly carried her empty bowl to the sink. She had learned that when adults stopped talking, listening mattered even more. Caleb rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I don't believe in coincidences." Elaine slowly nodded. "Neither do I anymore." She stood and picked up the leather document case. "I'll leave." Caleb looked up. "If I'm gone before daylight, none of this touches your custody case." He shook his head immediately. That's not how this works. It should. No. His answer came with quiet certainty. If someone is trying this hard to separate us, walking away won't stop them. Elaine lowered the case back onto the couch. I never imagined my mistakes would reach someone's home. Caleb met her eyes. Your mistakes didn't. He paused. Someone else's did. Those words landed harder than either of them expected. For months, Elaine had carried the weight of believing every disaster began with her signature. Hearing someone separate her poor judgment from deliberate wrongdoing was almost harder to accept than blame. She drew a slow breath. I approved policies I should have questioned. And now? Now I'd question everything. Caleb gave a faint nod. That's a start. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the kitchen as the automatic brewer clicked on. Outside, the first rays of sunlight reflected off the snow, making the neighborhood appear peaceful enough to fool anyone driving past. Inside, every minute suddenly mattered. Jada zipped her backpack and walked toward the hallway closet. Before putting on her coat, she reached for the small red rescue whistle hanging from its hook. She slipped it over her head without thinking. It had become as natural as tying her shoes. Elaine noticed. She never leaves home without it. No. Caleb smiled softly. My father gave it to her before he passed. He told her something I'll never forget. What? Caleb watched his daughter tighten the cord around her neck. He said people wait too long to ask for help. Jada looked back at them. Grandpa said loud isn't the same thing as brave. Elaine felt her throat tighten. There was wisdom in that little house she had never found inside the tallest boardroom. A notification chimed from Caleb's laptop on the dining table. He opened it. His employment file. The disciplinary warning Elaine had signed months earlier had been updated overnight. A new note had been added. Employee currently under internal review for possible interference with an active corporate investigation. Caleb frowned. I never received notice of this. Elaine stepped closer. They're building a record. So if I miss the 8 o'clock meeting, they'll say you abandoned your position. And if I attend, you'll arrive late to court. Neither option protected Jada. Caleb slowly closed the laptop. Whoever was planning this understood exactly where to apply pressure, not through threats against him, through the responsibilities he would never abandon. A yellow school bus rounded the corner and stopped at the end of the block. Its folding door opened with a familiar hiss. Jada shouldered her backpack. I've got to go. Caleb knelt and zipped her coat all the way to her chin. Straight home after school. I know. No stopping anywhere. I know. She hugged him tightly. Then, to Elaine's surprise, Jada turned and hugged her as well. It lasted only a second. When she stepped back, her face was serious. I don't know if I trust you yet. Elaine nodded. You shouldn't. But Dad does enough to bring you here. Jada looked directly into her eyes. So don't make him sorry. With that, she hurried out the front door toward the waiting bus, the little red whistle bouncing gently against her winter coat. Caleb stood at the window until the bus disappeared around the corner. Only then did he exhale. Behind him, Elaine spoke so quietly he almost missed it. I think your daughter just gave me the hardest job I've ever had. Caleb kept watching the empty street. No. His voice was calm. The hardest part starts after I walk out that door. He picked up his truck keys, knowing that before the morning was over, someone would force him to choose between protecting his livelihood and protecting the truth. Elaine stood as he reached for his coat. You can't leave me here. Caleb looked toward the front window before answering. I'm not leaving you alone. He walked to the hallway closet, removed a small metal lockbox and placed it on the kitchen table. Inside are emergency numbers. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, has a spare key. If anything feels wrong, don't answer the door. Call her first, then call 911. Elaine stared at the lockbox. You planned for emergencies. I planned for raising a child. There was no pride in his voice, only routine. He picked up a legal pad and wrote another short note. No phone calls unless absolutely necessary. Assume every company device is compromised. Elaine read it carefully. You really think it's that serious? I think whoever shut down an entire warehouse heating system isn't making small mistakes. She folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. I understand. Caleb reached into his toolbox and pulled out a compact digital thermometer and a carbon monoxide detector no larger than a paperback novel. Elaine watched him place both on the kitchen counter. You carry those everywhere? I've learned not to trust buildings. He switched on the detector. A green light blinked steadily. If this alarm sounds, you leave immediately. She nodded. He was preparing the house the same way he prepared a job site, quietly, methodically, leaving as little as possible to chance. Before opening the front door, Caleb paused. I need one promise. Elaine looked up. If someone comes here claiming they're from Northline, don't open the door. What if they have identification? Especially then. She understood. For the first time since he had found her beneath the loading dock, she realized Caleb's caution wasn't fear. It was discipline. Outside, the morning air cut through his jacket like broken glass. His pickup started on the second turn of the key. As he backed into the street, he glanced once toward the corner where the dark sedan had been parked. It was gone. That bothered him more than if it had still been there. People who wanted to intimidate stayed where they could be seen. People planning something disappeared. The roads had grown busier as Cleveland woke for another workday. School buses shared the streets with delivery trucks, city snowplows, and commuters clutching paper cups of coffee. Caleb drove toward Distribution Center 14, but his mind wasn't on the road alone. The anonymous note, the custody hearing, the forced staff meeting, the administrator account that had shut down the heating system, each piece fit somewhere. He simply couldn't see the whole picture yet. His truck's Bluetooth chimed. An incoming call. Luis Mendoza. Caleb answered through the hands-free system. Luis? You coming in? I got the message. Luis lowered his voice. Something's off, Caleb. What do you mean? They've got people from corporate walking around the warehouse before shift change. Nobody will say why. Caleb tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Who's here? I saw Martin Keene's assistant. That caught Caleb's attention. The vice president's office? Yeah. Luis hesitated. And somebody's been asking where you were between 3 and 5 this morning. Caleb's heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. When trouble became real, his father had taught him one rule. Slow down, think. Did you tell them anything? No. Good. Luis exhaled. I don't like this. Neither do I. The call ended. A few miles later, the massive Northline warehouse came into view through drifting snow. The parking lot was already filling. Black SUVs lined the front entrance. Corporate security officers stood beside the main doors. This wasn't an ordinary maintenance meeting. It looked more like an investigation. Caleb parked but didn't get out immediately. He rested one hand on the dashboard, listening. The engine idled with its familiar rhythm. The heater fan whispered through the vents. Nothing sounded wrong. He wished people were as honest as machines. Then he switched off the engine, stepped into the freezing morning, and walked toward the warehouse, unaware that inside the building, someone already held a file with his name printed across the front. The lobby felt different the moment Caleb walked in. Usually, maintenance workers gathered around the coffee machine, trading jokes before another long shift. This morning, no one laughed. Conversations stopped as soon as the security doors opened. A temporary badge scanner had been placed beside the entrance. Corporate security. Caleb clipped on his employee badge and watched the scanner flash green. Mr. Brooks. A man in a dark suit stepped forward before Caleb had taken 3 steps. Please come with me. Caleb recognized neither the face nor the company logo on the man's jacket. I'm here for the maintenance meeting. So are we. The answer revealed nothing. He followed the man down a hallway that normally led to the training room. Today, 2 security officers stood outside the door instead. Inside, nearly 30 maintenance employees sat quietly in folding chairs. Luis Mendoza caught Caleb's eye from the back row. Something was wrong. Luis gave the smallest shake of his head. Don't talk. Caleb understood. He took an empty seat. At exactly 8 o'clock, the room fell silent as Martin Keene entered. The acting executive wore a navy overcoat despite the warm building, carrying a thin black folder beneath one arm. His polished shoes clicked against the concrete floor with measured confidence. He smiled. It never reached his eyes. Good morning, everyone. Nobody answered. Martin set the folder on the table. First, I'd like to thank each of you for your dedication during what has been a challenging week for Northline. Corporate language. Smooth, carefully practiced. Then his tone shifted. Unfortunately, confidential company information has been compromised. Several employees exchanged nervous glances. Martin continued. We have reason to believe certain individuals have had unauthorized contact with suspended personnel. Caleb remained perfectly still. He remembered his father's advice during emergency rescues. When smoke fills a room, moving too quickly only makes you easier to find. Martin slowly scanned every face before allowing his gaze to rest on Caleb, only for a second. Then he looked away. So if anyone has information regarding Elaine Whitmore's whereabouts, Northline encourages full cooperation. Silence. Martin smiled again. Loyal employees have nothing to fear. Caleb almost laughed. He had heard similar sentences before every bad decision made by people with too much power. The presentation ended after only a few minutes. No discussion about the heating failure, no questions about the warehouse, nothing about employee safety. Instead, security officers began calling workers out one by one for routine interviews. Luis disappeared first. 5 minutes later, another technician, then another. Finally, a woman in human resources opened the door. Caleb Brooks. He stood calmly. The interview room across the hall contained only 3 chairs, a recording camera, and a single file lying neatly on the table. His name was printed across the cover. The HR representative folded her hands. This won't take long. Martin remained standing near the wall, saying nothing. The representative opened the file. Mr. Brooks, can you account for your whereabouts between 3:30 and 5 o'clock this morning? Caleb looked from the file to Martin, then back again. His answer came without hesitation. I was responding to an emergency maintenance call at Distribution Center 14. Can anyone verify that? The dispatch records can. She nodded as though expecting the answer. And after your maintenance call? Caleb paused. Every word suddenly mattered, not because he feared losing his job, because somewhere across town, Elaine Whitmore was sitting inside his home, trusting that he would protect the truth exactly as he had promised. He chose each word with care. I responded to a situation involving a person in medical distress. The HR representative looked down at her notes. Who was that person? The room became perfectly still. Even Martin stopped pretending to study the window. Caleb knew whatever came out of his mouth next would decide far more than the rest of his workday. He folded his hands on the table. I found someone suffering from severe cold exposure. The HR representative waited. Who? A person. Martin spoke for the first time. Mr. Brooks, this is an internal investigation. We expect full cooperation. Caleb met his eyes. And I'm cooperating. Then answer the question. I already did. The room settled into another heavy silence. Martin walked slowly around the table, stopping just behind the empty chair beside Caleb. You've been with Northline for almost 9 years. That's right. You've built a reputation. I've done my job. A reputation for making independent decisions. Caleb almost smiled. I've heard that before. Martin's expression remained calm. 6 months ago, you shut down Store 21 without authorization. I detected carbon monoxide. You ignored procedure. I followed safety. The HR representative quickly stepped in. Let's stay focused on today's events. She turned another page in the file. Did the individual you assisted possess company property? Caleb thought carefully. Yes. What property? I didn't inspect it. So you don't know? I know I didn't inspect it. Martin leaned forward. You're choosing your words very carefully. I always do. Not according to your disciplinary record. Caleb glanced toward the folder. My disciplinary record says I prevented a store from operating. It says you exceeded your authority. It also says nobody was injured. Martin said nothing. For the first time, the confidence in his posture seemed to tighten. Caleb noticed. People revealed themselves the same way machines did, under pressure. The HR representative slid a printed photograph across the table. It showed the rear loading dock at Distribution Center 14. Snow covered the pavement. 2 figures stood beneath the loading canopy. The image was blurry. Faces were impossible to distinguish. Do you recognize this? She asked. Caleb studied it for several seconds. It looks like the loading dock. Who are those people? I can't identify them. Martin tapped the edge of the photo. Our security team believes one of them may be you. Then your security team should provide a clearer picture. Another pause. Then Caleb asked the question no one expected. Why isn't anyone asking why the heating system was manually placed into maintenance mode? The HR representative blinked. Martin answered instead. That issue is under review. It wasn't a malfunction. We know. So someone with administrator privileges shut down heat during record-breaking temperatures. Martin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We're aware. And yet this meeting isn't about employee safety. No answer. It's about finding one person. Still no answer. Caleb leaned back. My father was a firefighter. Neither of them understood why he had suddenly changed subjects. He used to tell me something. Martin looked impatient. If smoke is coming out of a building and everyone is arguing about who pulled the alarm. Caleb's eyes settled on the photograph. They're probably looking in the wrong direction. The room became very quiet. The HR representative slowly closed the file. We appreciate your perspective. I wasn't offering perspective. I was stating a fact. Before anyone could respond, someone knocked sharply on the interview room door. A security officer stepped inside. He leaned toward Martin and whispered something too quietly for Caleb to hear. Martin's expression changed, only for an instant. Then he recovered. He turned back toward Caleb. Our interview is finished. Am I free to leave? For now. The words lingered. For now. Caleb walked out without another sentence. Luis was waiting near the vending machines. What happened? They were looking for Elaine. Luis glanced over both shoulders before lowering his voice. I heard something. What? They're saying the warehouse security recordings between 3 and 4 this morning have disappeared. Caleb stopped walking. Deleted? I don't know. Luis swallowed. but somebody got to them before corporate security. Caleb looked back toward the closed interview room door. If the cameras were gone, someone wasn't trying to discover the truth anymore. Someone was already rewriting it. And yet, Caleb Brooks chose to protect a freezing stranger before he protected himself. Sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the one with the most power. It's the one who refuses to let fear decide what's right. This story reminds us that one courageous choice can change far more than a single moment. The hardest decisions often come when doing the right thing costs you something. But those are the moments that reveal who you truly are. Today, think about one situation where fear has been making your decision for you. The next time you're tempted to stay silent, remember what Caleb chose: to stand by the truth even when it put everything he loved at risk. If this story stayed with you, leave a 1 in the comments. I'd also love to know, what would you have done if you were standing in Caleb's shoes that freezing morning? Stay with me, because the next story begins with another ordinary person facing a choice that will change everything.